All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Clean Start Perspectives. I'm Thomas Hall, Executive Director of CleanStart, and I'm excited to have you here with us today to explore real stories behind launching a clean tech venture. But first, I want to highlight that we're supported by our local utility, SMUD, which has an aggressive 2030 plan for zero emissions, Chico Start, Fresno State, both iHubs in the Central Valley that we support by through educations and connections, Witten Law, a regional law firm that supports early stage clean tech companies with their legal needs, Baker Tilly, recently acquired Moss Adams, one of our sponsors, and we just had a great session with them on AI. I suggest you go to our YouTube channel and check it out. Also, River City Bank, a leading lender in clean tech projects. And with that, I want to talk about today's conversation. Today's conversation is all about the journey. It's not just the highlight reel, but an honest path of building a sustainability startup from the ground up. We're joined by William McCarthy, who knows his past pretty well. William set out to launch a sustainability company in Florida, navigating the early stage challenges of a tough market and unique hurdles of building in the Southeast. While his startup ultimately didn't succeed, the lessons he gained are invaluable. In this session, we will talk about what it's really like to pursue a climate focused venture, the risk, the resilience, the reality of trying to make an impact through innovation. If you've ever wondered what it takes to take the leap or what it takes when things don't go as planned, this conversation you will not want to miss. So please join me in welcoming William McCarthy. Yay. Everyone clap. All right. So first I was going to ask, take us back to when you started your company.
Okay, yeah, Dunzel's Sailbags, we started in August of 2020. During COVID, I was building bikepacking equipment in my parents' garage, essentially, and that funneled into having a background in soft goods development. And then as basically I was a fundraising director for the Florida State University Sailing Club, and that's how we really got started turning marine textile waste, sailboat sails, and a wide variety of different types of fabric into products. And that really sort of jump-started our journey into like building with sustainability in mind and really being on the forefront of our mission is like, how can we use business to do good? I think that's always the goal. And, take all the waste that currently exists, not create something new, and then create a really fantastic product for the consumer that not only is really unique, but has tons of functionality that's going to last a long time and hopefully stops them from buying similar products that have a much more harmful environmental impact.
So you're upcycling kind of, I guess, sailing waste. Is that kind of a short summary way to put it?
Mhm.
So you go, you get the waste and you turn it into a product that you sell. I think it's a vision that a lot of people have. I know here in Sacramento, if you go to the atrium, you can find people upcycling everything from rubber to bedding. So what were some of the difficult parts of building this company initially when you started? Was it creating the product, getting the resources to upcycle, consistency of product? What were some of the initial hurdles that you had to jump over?
Oh man, all of those. But I will say that one of the problems that we ended up spending the most amount of time really working on was the supply chain. So, at scale, how do you bring in enough material on a monthly basis to continue to grow a business at a relatively quick rate? And basically, it evolved into us doing a lot of more or less like cold sales. We basically treated the supply aspect like another business where we'd go out, talk to businesses, talk to organizations that had this material and figure out how to get it back to our workshop in Tallahassee. But consistency was always a problem when you're using a waste product because there is no standard preset to some stuff that you pick up basically out of someone's trash can. It's how do you put a standard to that? And that ultimately leads to problems downstream with, product consistency on the consumer end, but also on the manufacturing front. How do you how do you take basically waste and allow the current manufacturing environment to manufacture it at a cheap enough price so that you can make money doing it? And that's probably one of the areas that ultimately led to the downfall is like we just couldn't make the product cheap enough because we had to do so much of the labor in-house and it was so slow going because it was really hard to scale the procedures that we were using.
Hmm. So you hit on kind of price there, and I think that's always a tough thing for, clean tech and sustainability tech, because like if it's an energy, you're making an electron and someone else is making an electron. It's kind of hard to say, my electron's better than this electron to the consumer just because, you maybe made it sustainably. Maybe, there's some people that want that, but it ends up being, the same kind of end product. But I get also with what you were doing, it still is a sort of fashion thing. So was there an approach to selling it to people that were like, hey, I want, this really durable bag, but I also want the sustainability portion of it. Did you find that, was that there was maybe a price ceiling that you would reach on that, or that, it was just people would look at it and they're like, yeah, it's sustainable, but I'm going to buy the cheaper bag?
Pricing is huge. I think we got into a pretty good position where we could charge enough because our target market was more or less middle-aged women who A are doing most of the purchasing for the household and come from higher income households. And they have a more of a green thumb,
Hmm.
apparently. But it's really hard to convince someone. And so I have a background in product development, and the same principles apply to any product. You cannot sell the product based fully on its sustainability. So
Hmm.
the other thing that we spent most of the time doing, other than literally getting material, is how do we create something so functional, so fashionable that you don't need to sell it on sustainability. You don't even need to bring it up. So like when they pick it up, they say, "Wow, like this is like so robust, like it's kind of heavy almost. This is different than most of the other products." And then also they're instantly like in their head, they're thinking, oh, like I totally know someone who would want this, or like I use a bag every day and I keep ripping out the bottoms because they put so much stuff in there. And then it's like an easier sell. So
So
um
did you have to go and demo it or show them, or is it, what was kind of, I guess, your go-to market with this to prove that the bag was better?
yeah, absolutely getting in front of the customer. So over the course of the business, we probably attended about 50-ish in-person events. So like often multi-day sales events where you could demo the product in front of someone. So like I think that sustainability is almost some of the practices you have to sort of step back. It's like, yeah, great. Modern marketing is great, but like get your feet on the ground, get yourself out there. Like it oftentimes is not that much fun to go pitch people nonstop for 3 days to sell a relatively inexpensive product. But every single time someone would touch our product, they say, "Wow, like this is different." And that's there you go. Like that's the proof that like you need to get out there and go show it to people.
What activities did you do that you felt like got the biggest return to your company? Was it marketing? Like, was it product development? Was it spending more time on trying to find sourcing and driving costs down? What did you feel like when you were trying to divide your time up on your startup, you had the biggest return on? And what do you wish you spent more time on?
Biggest ROI was going to these in-person events,
Hmm.
100%. So like they were expensive, there was travel expense, but what would happen is we would sell product and we would also it's double-sided. So it would put us in contact with all the people who had the material who we could then source from. So it was always like we would always drive somewhere with a bunch of product and we would always come back with a bunch of material. That was always the plan is like, how can we, double edge this? But man, that's a really great question is what would drive. Yeah. I think,
That's my gotcha question.
yeah, product matters. Like you can't deny that like if you don't have a great product, you can't sell it. So,
Hmm.
but I think with sustainability also being fantastic at storytelling. Like we were doing so many activities in the background to build like this one product that people would see. It was incredibly difficult it was honestly hard to tell people, but that is what sells it. It's like, oh, like we're driving around the state of Florida, like meeting with sailing clubs and yacht clubs to pick up their waste. And then we also go back to our workshop and we literally like cut everything ourselves. Like everything is handmade. And in our industrialized world, that's a big selling point. But also I think from the beginning, I think doing pitch competitions is free marketing. There's a chance
Mhm.
to raise some money, but also all of a sudden you're fresh, you're working through your pitch, how to sell people, and then also like every single pitch competition probably has like, 50 people or 100 people that see your, see what you're doing. So I
So
think
what were some of the results of, going and pitching? Was it sales? Did you get support from anyone that wanted to invest or partners?
not any investment. I also think it's really difficult to invest in the model that we created. It was basically not an attractive investment because it's so slow. Also, from 3 months in, we were making revenue, which is a bit odd, or is a bit different for most like kind of, startup companies. It's like, oh, we had revenue from 3 months in, but we raised $12,000, which was enough to just like get us get us fired up. Get us fired up because like you got to build momentum in the beginning, and we raised all that money in the first 6 months. I was like, okay, like $12,000, like it seems like a lot. Obviously, it doesn't get you very far, but if you also have revenue, it can kind of supplement some of those activities to help you grow a little bit quicker. But also, partners are huge. I mean, network is big, and Florida especially. Like if we were pitching in Tampa, Florida, there's probably, you know, tens of thousands of boats. Like there you go. There's a supply opportunity that's absolutely massive that could pretty much run our operation.
So you're trying to source a lot of your product or, the waste streams in Florida at these shipping places. What was your experience in trying to convince them to give you their waste? I know from talking with people in the past, there's this kind of misconception that, oh, it's someone's trash. They don't care. But it seems like it's actually always been harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's incredibly difficult to convince people to give you their trash. Funny enough, but the reason being is it's very difficult to convince them because it creates a operational change in their business that more or less is a headache, if anything, but also could cost them money in a way. Like they've got to do an extra step and they're like, we don't want to add any cost to labor expenditure if we don't have to. But I mean, basically, the way that we organized or structured our supply trips is we would head out for a week, maybe. Say we're going to start at the top of Florida, and we've got we've got 25 or 30 businesses that we're going to stop at. And you try to book lunch meetings, you walk in there. It's always extremely confusing because people are like, what do you like, why do you want our trash? Like, like, what's the catch here? Like why also, you don't look like a normal trash man necessarily, but like you want our stuff. But so it was a cold sales approach. It was like, we need a volume and we need to get in front of them and we need to convince them that there's some benefit.
What ended up being the most successful way to approach them and I guess close on getting their trash? Did you have to pay them or?
Yeah. I think probably 95% of all of our material. So of the 10,000 pounds that we recovered, we probably paid for maybe 500 pounds of it. So what happens is you end up filtering through, all these people and you end up basically working with a few of them that consistently supply you. So you're building a long-term relationship. That's really the goal. So in the sea of people who don't care, there's 10% that do. And so you're trying to get to those individuals who are like, you know what, like 100%, like we love what you're doing, you can somehow appeal to them and then it makes it easy because you don't have to go search for new people. But also there's only so much material that kind of can come from one business. So yeah, it was probably consistently one of the hardest things to solve was how do you consistently grow a business on a non-flowing stream of material.
Hmm. You guys really don't have the ability to go and choose vendors at that point. If one vendor's not working out, you can't go to the next person on it.
Yeah.
What were some of the things, I guess, that stopped you from trying to industrialize or automate some of the manufacturing processes? Was it just inputs?
Inputs definitely stop things. Scale matters. I think we did okay, so we made about 30% of all the product from end to end in-house. So ourselves, I would sit on the sewing
Hmm.
machine, or we had some staff. And then we worked with a small contractor in Southwest Florida, which was, 4 or 5 hours from us, who would only do sewing. And that's our what we found is that the companies absolutely did not want to work with material. They said like no one was interested. They're like, you cannot pay us enough to do the cutting of the material, to basically the pre-manufacturing steps. And so what happened is that ended up with us doing it in-house, which is 100%
Hmm.
fine because you can control that. Also allows you to be really agile with product design. So we took 12 products to market, probably like, I mean, we maybe sold a few thousand units, and 75% of all those units were unique to
Hmm.
themselves. Like they're all different. So you cannot scale, like it's very difficult to scale that. At least it's expensive to scale that. And just the last note on that is like we want to go to Mexico where labor is cheaper. The problem is that then we had to ship material to Mexico and we had to ship it back. And so the 30% in labor savings that we would achieve would just get eaten up by the shipping, at least until we could send maybe a container full of material, which you're looking at like $100,000 of money up front or something like that.
So did you ever consider like a Kickstarter campaign or anything like that to try to get a bunch of pre-sales or?
I'm sure we considered it, yeah.
Mhm.
And we didn't do it though. That's ultimately what happened. We didn't do it. I think what happened is we really got focused on just driving revenue through sales, like the old-fashioned way, which I think is was one of the. It's kind of funny in this modern age that like we got so sucked into this industry, like the cut and sew manufacturing industry is so old school, and
Mhm.
there's probably plenty of ways to bring a modern touch to it, and we did what we could. But we sold through, instead of selling, doing Kickstarter, or we sold through our website, we sold through online retailers, which is really in my mind, the new age of wholesale. It's like, I don't know, you do the fulfillment, basically they list your product on their website, they drive traffic to their website. And that was actually one of the things that we got into at the end that really drove a lot of online sales, is like using these online retailers that only sell online and are super good at doing the marketing for it.
Mhm.
But the Kickstarter, maybe we should have done it, you know?
Oh, got to experiment on it. So here's kind of, I guess, one of the tougher questions. Like, at what point or what indicators or metrics did you use where you're like, okay, maybe this isn't working out?
Yeah, I think, oh man, so I think the biggest thing about, so this is like the third business I've created that's had revenue, that's driven revenue. So the hardest part is determining, when is it time to move on. And I think I'll preface by saying I love sustainability, and I lost some hope that what we were doing was really creating change for the environment. And when your Northern Light is like what drives you every day is to go out there and say like, oh, we're doing something fantastic for the environment. All of a sudden you start to, run numbers on carbon, your carbon impact, or, what's the possible scale of this business. And you realize that like I can't even live off this thing. And I've been working on it for 4 years. I mean, that's a long time to realize that like the margins are so slim. So I think it's a practical thing, right? So
Mhm.
there's like, life is real. And but also like I think I lost interest because what happened is I go out and everyone who is crushing it in the fashion industry is obsessed with like, you know, the fashion aspect of it. And I was never into that. And I think maybe we could have hired that in to help that. But also The third year of the business is when we try to push as much energy into it and take the most amount of risk to say like, is this viable long term? And I think, we did the most amount of sales in the third year. But what happens is you look at the numbers at the end of the year and you're like, okay, things might look sort of similar to this. We might get some savings at scale, but it's just like this isn't gonna work out long term. And more or less, I'm gonna have to like move on to something new, which is honestly it creates kind of an existential scenario where you're like, man, what have I been doing with my life for 4 years? Where it's like, and then you kind of reflect back and say, okay, like we moved 10,000 pounds of waste out of the waste stream. Like that's a positive. You can't deny that we did something good for the world, but eventually you have to, look inside and say, okay, like eventually I'm gonna have to do something good for myself because I'm not gonna be able to do this forever. And sustainability is about, yes, creating sustainability for the environment, right? But also sustainable for the company to continue to live and thrive and create change and have an impact on the world. And I don't think you ever know. I think there's never an answer. There's no real answer that says like, you should do this or that. But
Well, there's always one way to guarantee your outcome, and that's not do it. You know,
absolutely.
you go out there, you test something. I mean, that's one of the things I think actually makes, America and the US one of the greatest countries is because we go out, we try things, we fail, we get back up and we try again.
Hmm.
And it sounds like you had done a couple businesses before. Share some of your previous business experience before going around convincing sailors to give you their sales.
Yeah, I would say I think right when I turned 18, I started like pressure washing company, which is service based, which is mostly like operational heavy. And so I
Hmm.
think that's what primed me the most to start Dunzels is like, I think I think maybe the younger side of entrepreneurs are like more into the internet business.
Hmm.
Like I'm not good at that. Like I love to actually do like the hard part is like go out and like get on the ground and like get sweaty and be wet or you know like go do the physical part of the business. So I think that's what really got me warmed up to run Dunzels. But also just like by starting early, you realize that you're capable of doing something, and that's the most important thing. It's like
Hmm.
you can dance around all this stuff about doing the research, right, and thinking about what's a good idea. But when it comes down to it, like, I mean, we sold $200,000 product and we realized that it's not going to work, but at least we did that. So at least I think you can be confident that you at least tried something, like you're saying.
Now you also had I guess, the privilege of working on sustainability, clean, and kind of climate business in Florida, which is not always the most welcoming of many, I guess, progressive aspects of the world. Did you have any troubles when it came to like, hey, I'm doing a sustainability project or a product that people were like, just no, I don't want it, or
Change the messaging.
Mhm.
That's it. There's no reason to, for example, yeah, of course, they don't necessarily care about sustainability, but change the messaging. So it's kind of actually funny. It feels like almost like a slight. You, instead of telling them on the sustainability, you go, okay, like, we do make this incredible durable product that's water resistant. All of a sudden, like, you can put this on your boat. They might not give a damn about the environment, but they're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, it kind of matches my aesthetic.
Mhm.
But I think also it really teaches you I think it's actually good. It really fills you out because if you can't sell on sustainability, you find all the other ways to do it. And you find a path through. But yeah, it's a funny thing. I mean, I'm so grateful that CleanStart exists here in Sacramento. This would never exist in Florida. And it's fantastic that it creates so much conversation about building in the clean space because it's critical at this
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah, it is. So if you had to do it all over again, would you, and what would you do differently?
This is a fantastic question because there's so much. Okay, so I think the biggest one is focus more on customer acquisition. Like I think that often you can get through a lot of your problems by selling more. But also on the flip side, one of the things that was preached to me was you can't make up for margin with volume. So, but I don't know, maybe we could have, you never know. But I think selling more, finding more channels, like for example, doing a Kickstarter probably would have been a good idea to at least give it a try. And it might have solved some of our bigger supply problems because what happens if you sell more customer acquisition, you get in contact with more people who have material. But also, I think, you know, man, I'm sorry. I actually have some.
Would you do it again?
I would definitely do it again. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no. I think that the sustainability spoke for itself, and that's what we, basically went out to do. But also, I think okay, another big part was when we came down to closing the company. I think we were thinking about, how do you close, right? What do you do? How do you turn 4 years of work into something positive? And we just did not think about selling the company enough in the beginning. So build the sell. That's it. Any company I ever do again is build the sell. So if we ever want to move on, you can recap some of that value in cash.
They think about your exit. I think that's probably something investors want you to think about too when you're pitching to them is, you make money when you get paid or when you sell the company. Those
Hmm.
are, the 2 points that investors and I guess, people working on the company get paid. And the big one is that exit,
Yeah.
that sell the company on it. And it's hard to, it's hard to think about when you're going to leave this something that you're dumping all these hours into. Now, got a question from Gary I see in the audience, which is, on reflection, we talked a little bit about the pricing at the beginning. What would have
Mhm.
you done differently to reduce costs?
Ooh, what would I have done to reduce costs? There's probably a bunch of I think we were bleeding in operational cost. So we probably could have done more with less people. I think we were overly ambitious about how much we could grow.
Hmm.
And I think there was a mix match in sort of priorities or value or ability to grow a sustainable company that did, we're basically more or less like almost vertically integrated and how fast we really wanted to grow. So
Hmm.
what was the actual limit to that? And then what did we really achieve? And so I think we were overly ambitious about, okay, like, let's bring in another person because there's going to be a bump come the winter time in our season. Like we're going to need an extra person. It's like maybe we didn't really need that extra person and labor's expensive. So also there's probably a bunch of waste in in the supply chain. We were so concerned about running out of material, right? We had this like sort of this mindset that if we ran out, we were gonna die. So you're spending so much time, so much money on the road, going to these meetings, right? To try to plan for something that wasn't gonna happen, maybe.
What about on the other side of it? Upon reflection, what do you think you could have done to potentially increase prices to grow your margin?
Yeah, so towards the end, we had two funny scenarios. So in the last like 6 months of running the business, we worked with Red Bull energy drinks.
Hmm.
We created like a small collection of product for them. And then we also got way heavier into doing custom orders. So people would come to us who own sailboats who wanted to turn their own sails into products. And for example, creating a duffel bag for that person, was $250 versus our sort of retail product was 150. And more or less the same labor to create that, but because it was a one-off, it operates a little differently. So I think we should have dove way more into doing custom orders, but the person had to build all the custom orders was me. So I was spending, a tremendous amount of time working on one single project. And but also I think that those are the individuals who are willing to pay the most. So I think you could have gone up to, you're not selling them a bag, right? You're selling them the memory. And that emotional part is really what drives a higher price, to be honest.
Yeah, got a note from Dubois. The custom work was a huge unlock. Too bad it came so close to the end.
The
Yeah.
ball was, he was a advisor, very important part of the team.
Well, that's I think there. If you're not looking back and figuring out what you could have done better and earlier, you're probably not improving. I don't think I can think of a single person I've talked to that can honestly say, or that has honestly said, "Oh no, we got it all right the first time." And if someone ever says that, I'm going to be very suspicious because that's not how things work and how you test things and build things on it. What are some things that I mean, I guess words of wisdom you to give to anyone who is going to be starting a business in clean tech and sustainability? What advice would you give them?
I think there's a feeling, especially in clean tech, that like nothing really works the way it's supposed to. Like nothing
Mhm.
works the way you think it's going to. Like I think there's all this traditional sort of entrepreneurship advice that people give. And I think that building in the green space is widely different. I think that you have to approach things. I think, for example, approaching things more holistically is super important because the partners that you're going to work with, and they're all maybe thinking about it from a more like holistic standpoint. So it's like they care about the sustainability less than the business. So if you need to appeal to those individuals, like you need to be aligned in that way as well. So, one of the fantastic things that I think really helped us is we didn't have to we created a really professional looking product, but it didn't have to be completely polished. Like they wanted the product to look like it was like almost it had been come straight off the sailboat, right? Or had come
Mhm.
straight from the sales. It's like, so you need to make sure you're aligned there. And also I think location could matter more. I think that the ecosystem that you're building in is so critical. And that's what I've learned from living in the Sacramento region in the last 6 months is like you end up having conversations with people who have done far, far larger things and they've overcome all these problems that you might be having. And you can get to a larger scale quicker if you're having those conversations. Like it's funny because it's so simple. But like building in the silo. Unfortunately, I think of the region that we were in kind of made things difficult. Also, we had to travel all the time. So it's like all this time gets sucked up commuting to and from where our customers were, where our supply was. Also, like huge one that people do say is like you need to be all in. I think there was a lack of focus sometimes because it was like, oh, like, you got to pay the rent some way, right? And so we're doing some other things. We're spread out way too thin. So it's like maybe giving yourself like that year or 2 years to just like only think about this one problem is absolutely the way to do it. I don't, I think it's too easy as an entrepreneur to be so fragmented that you're not really like focusing on the meat of the problem. You're not obsessed with the things you have to overcome and yeah, I think it creates problems.
Mhm. So you come out, you've come to Sacramento. I'm still passionate about sustainability and clean tech. What's next for you?
I'm very interested in a large scale climate solutions. I think that working on like sort of smaller scale project absolutely gave me the drive to say like what's really going to create the change that I want to see. So I'm actually getting an engineering degree, a mechanical engineering degree right now, and looking forward into, how can I utilize that to maybe work in energy or more large scale solutions like carbon capture. There's so many great things going on here in Sacramento and in this region, so many opportunities. So Really just like trying to drive sustainability into everything I do still and get connected with people who are like change makers, who are like on the ground actually doing the work because there's a lot of talk about sustainability and it seems like not a lot of people are like really getting their hands dirty sometimes. So
Mhm.
I desperately want to be the person who's like getting their hands dirty and doing it,
Yeah. Well, we're glad that you're here. It's always good to have another person that's excited about not only sustainability, clean tech, and fighting climate change, but doing it in a sustainable manner that can grow and scale across the country. And, sometimes you pay your dues by doing like the hard work and discovering, a way that it doesn't work. I think what is Thomas Edison said, he didn't fail at inventing the light bulb 1,000 times. He copied it off the guy next to him. I mean, he learned 1,000 ways that didn't work. So, I just want to now ask, do you have any final words as we wrap this up that you want to shout out to the world there?
yeah, I think one thing about closing a company, like seeing it from end to end, I think people are probably thinking about closing. Like if you're thinking about closing and you really feel like you've put on everything you've got, like, don't be afraid to do it. Because I think one of my experiencing is like things always get better after. Like you've got all the knowledge, like you're more equipped than ever to handle this problem. And if you really feel like it's not going to be it, whatever, move on. That's what entrepreneurship is. And try not to tie it to your well-being too much because you did most of the time I think people do everything they can, they give everything they can, and if you're not 100% on board, it's just not going to work because you're pushing the boulder up a hill every day, and as soon as you step out from underneath it, it comes rolling back. So
I think those are wise words, perseverance, pressure, but like you can't open a new door if you don't close the one that's, not working. So I want to thank you, William, for sharing your journey today.
thank
I
yeah,
want to thank you for sharing your story with honesty and depth. It's really hard to get out there and say, hey, I did something and it didn't work. But I think that's where you can learn the most from things. Thank you for sharing it, that, about your startup experience more broadly, that it's not always linear, the taking risks, trying again, learning from setbacks, staying committed, pushing that boulder up the hill, and solving real problems. I want to thank everyone who joined us today. I hope this session sparked new insights and gave you deeper appreciation for the courage it takes to build something meaningful in the clean tech economy. These stories and experiences that we have in Clean Start's perspectives are, important ones, and this is an especially hard one, but essential one to, really understand how we grow as a community. With that, I also want to thank our supporters, SMUD, Chico Start, Fresno State, Witten Law, Baker Tilly, River City Bank. If you're working on your own venture or just starting to explore the space, know that you're not alone. Clean Start is here, and our supporters are also here to help you. And I want to make sure that you check out our upcoming events. Tonight, we've got a great meetup with two innovators in the energy storage space. Greg Conley, who's fresh off of leaving the CEO position at Trifecta, and Dr. PhD Dr. Yeah, Ryan Foon, who works at LICAP, who they are a battery manufacturer in the Sacramento region that's making some really good progress. So come check it out. It'll be at Bloom Co-working. Looking forward to seeing everyone there. Thanks again for spending your time with us. Stay inspired, stay connected, and hopefully we'll see you at the next Clean Start Perspective. Thank you for attending.